All right. I want to welcome you and say thank you for taking the time to join me today. I am excited to spend this time with you. Over the next few weeks, we are going to be having a weekly chat either with me or with other professionals. Dr. Dave Robinson, Marianne Michaelis, and Amy Andrus are going to be participating with us each week. You're going to have access to one of us. And then to those who are subscribing, you'll be able to ask questions, and we will do our best to answer your questions. So one of the things that I want to get started with today, people have been asking me about the transition, human intimacy. What is it about, and why are we doing it? Why are you doing this? I've been a part of Bloom for Women, Path for Men, and I just want to make sure for those who are familiar with that, our desire is to help betrayed partners, and we provided a lot of different services over time. But one of my biggest desires is to transition into human intimacy, where we're going to be talking about healthy relationships, marital relationships, dating relationships, and I want to cover the lifespan from literally from all the way from birth all the way through the grave, and when we lose loved ones. And so it's really cradle to grave. And my desire with human intimacy is to make it a place where people can come and learn how to have healthy relationships over their lifespan. And so that's one of my core goals with human intimacy. And the reason why it's something that matters to me is because over the last almost 30 years, as I've been interacting with individuals, one of the consistent things that I've found is that we really are struggling in our relationships. We're struggling to connect. We're struggling when we deal with conflict, how to deal with the conflict. And as a consequence, so many relationships are not making it. And that also has its own impact on our society. And so my hope is that through the right information and education, we can all be better at relationships. That includes me. I want to learn. And so I'm studying, reading, spending a lot of time learning how to do this, these things. So anyway, a little bit more background on what we're doing and why we're doing it the way we are. So I am glad that you have taken the time to be with me today. Again, I appreciate anything of your time. I just genuinely do. So with that being said, I want to now jump into today's topic. And really today's topic is more about helping us understand how to avoid some things, but also what we can do to maybe accelerate our healing after sexual betrayal. And also, I want to talk about things that you can do for yourself in your healing journey. So again, I'm going to be recording this, and I will be putting it out to everybody who has signed up, so you can participate if you are watching this delayed. All right, so let me now just real quick. This is our online course, The Essentials to Healing from Sexual Betrayal. Some of this is content that's discussed in there. But there's four things that I'm going to be talking about today, and it's why information matters and how much information should we be getting after betrayal. And really what I'm finding is when individuals are just early after discovery, they're really struggling with what information. So they typically are going to ask lots and lots and lots of questions. And often the betraying partner will answer questions, but then there gets to be a tipping point where it's like, I've already answered that question. I've already answered that question. I've already answered that question. And now we get into this clash. And part of the reason why is because we run into what's called the Zeigarnik effect. Issues are not resolved. And when issues aren't resolved, that means they're going to continually come back. And Bloom Zeigarnik, she discovered that up to, and other researchers since then, about 90% of unresolved issues continue to, so to speak, haunt us. And so it's important, if you're going to heal, that we get the right information. And that information is important to understand. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. And I'll be giving you some resources for that as well. The second thing I'm going to be talking about is how to avoid common pitfalls after discovery. And to me, this is really an important part, because individuals who are right after discovery, you can make a lot of mistakes because you don't know any different. So if you're early in the discovery phase, it's really important to understand how to avoid some pitfalls. And if you've been in this for a while, you'll probably look back and say, oh yeah, I probably did that, or we did that. The next are 5 essential steps to heal after sexual betrayal. Now, this part actually comes from some of the research that we did with people coming to our clinic. And not just our clinic, but we were surveying clinicians, clients around the country. And the question we were asking was, your therapist meeting your needs? Really interesting feedback is the most common we get. maybe if it was criticism or suggestion, maybe would be a better way to say it, is we need more direction. We need to know the path. We need to know how we get through this healing process. And so one of the things that I want to share with you are, some of the things that we found to really provide that path. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. And then if you have questions, please put them in the queue. Just a question, answer any questions or ask any questions that you have, and I will do my best to get to them at the end of this session. Then finally, the last part of it is I'm going to share with you a strategy of how you can join us, and that will be something that we will do. So, all right. Before I get started, are there any questions that you have before I jump into this? All right. So I want to now talk about some of the common pitfalls that we face. And in order for me to do that, I think it's important that we understand three or four things. Right after discovery, it's in my mind, it's like being in a car accident. And you come out and you're like, what in the world just happened? You turn to your partner and you realize they were driving the car and they weren't paying any attention. They weren't taking care of your safety. And so one of the core things that we have to recognize is the common pitfalls that we bump into. And whoops, what? Wow, some of my slides just disappeared. Oh, wait, there we are. There we go. All right. Sorry, my computer's giving me a little bit of grief today, so I hope you're patient with me. All right, so one of the first things that I encourage you to do is to watch and listen. Because one of the most common pitfalls that people are sharing with me is they get into a situation with their partner. They found out what their partner's been doing, and they have a zillion questions. Now, as we ask the right questions and we learn to ask the right questions, we have to watch and we have to listen. We generally don't want to start off by making fast or quick decisions. Now, what I mean by that is I've seen people, they go tell everybody. I've seen people so angry that they destroy things. So if we can slow down after discovery and not to minimize the pain, because I know that the pain is extreme and excruciating. But when we make decisions that put our lives and others' lives, say, at risk, I've seen people drive crazy. I've seen people do some self-harm. I've seen individuals whose mind has been racing to the point where they are so overwhelmed, they do things that they just generally would not do. And so what I'm saying here is we slow down, we watch and we listen. We listen to self, our body, but we also become an observer. And really, this is one of the core things that I'd like to get across today is you want to become an observer. The other common pitfall that I see is individuals develop what's called a negative internalized belief. And that comes from a lot of the research that I've done. And I asked this question: what have you come to believe about yourself as a result of your partner's behaviors? And if you look at your core internalized belief, you really think about it, you're going to realize that you've identified something that you're actually not. And let me explain what I mean by that. If I say to you, you are a person of infinite worth and value, can you accept that? I am a lovable person. Can you accept that? I matter. Can you accept that? I am awesome. Can you accept that? Now, you may not be able to accept those, or maybe if you've done some work, you can say, well, I think so, maybe just not with my spouse. But what we find is individuals develop these negative internalized belief. And really what that is a separation from self. We are born, my belief, that we are all born with high self-worth. And it is only through life's experiences that we start to question our worth. And so one of the common challenges, pitfalls we see is we internalize these beliefs and accept them as if they're true, which ultimately separates us from our true self. Now, let me give an example here. Many of the betrayed partners that I've worked with over the years, they want to be loving, they want to express, and they want to show their love, but they're struggling mightily, especially with their partner, because they don't want to show love to their partner because they don't feel safe and loved by their partner. So what's happened there is they want to be loving, but they're afraid to for protection reasons. Now, I'm not saying that we just go give love to our partner. I'm simply saying it's going against who you naturally are, and that is a stress in and of itself. When I can't be my real self, that is a major issue. Now, that means that I might need to give my love to my children, to my parents. That means I might, because I don't know how to be with you right now because of the pain that you've inflicted on me by your betrayal. Now, you might even say, and here's something that I often do in our intensives, I say, what would happen if you were that loving self with boundaries? And that's a whole different conversation. Can I show love and have boundaries and protect myself? That's a skill that we have to learn and work through. That's one of the core things that we do when I do our individual work or when I do group work is actually learn how to create these boundaries with the language of love. Boundaries with love. All right. Another other part that I find that people do is quick decisions. And one of the core things that I found it's a pitfall is that individuals they make quick or rash decisions, and the consequence is harder for them to live with. Let me give an example. They create boundaries that they really don't intend. If you do this, I'm going to divorce you. Well, that quick decision, without actually analyzing it, would I really divorce them? Maybe. But then I've said it. Now, what do I do with what I've said? I don't want to be incongruent. Now, if I say legitimately, if this happens again, I'm going to divorce you, and I do, then that's not necessarily a quick decision. It's something that you've defined for yourself. But can you live with your decisions? So, quick decisions, slowing down the process after discovery is really important. And if you have been stuck in patterns over time, sometimes your decision making was set early and you have old patterns that need to be changed. So I have found people that just continuously, well, okay, I'm numb now, but my partner keeps acting out. They keep acting out and they keep acting out, and now I don't have any boundaries because I don't even trust my own decision making. So quick decisions in contrast with decisions where I feel stuck and I'm not making any decisions. Having decisions that help us move forward is also a part of the change process when we heal. So it's I should have put probably here not just quick decisions, but inability to make decisions. And both ends of that spectrum are keep us stuck. Because quick decisions, we move so fast that we don't have, it's kind of a whiplash in contrast with not being able to make decisions. And so being able to move things forward, getting the information which we're going to be talking about, and moving forward in a methodical way is what we want to do during a crisis. A few years ago, a researcher was studying what happens to people in a crisis. And they found that there were three separate groups. 10% of people in a crisis actually make matters better. They can analyze a situation, they can come up with a plan and a strategy, and they move on it. Then you have 80%, the biggest part by far, we actually freeze up. 80% in a crisis freeze up. They get stuck. That's kind of the language they use. And after that period of time, they kind of work through things to make some decisions, some good, some not so good. But in a crisis, 80% of people's initial response is actually to freeze up. We don't know how to respond. And I think that that's pretty accurate. If I was to assess individuals who've experienced sexual betrayal, I think that that's probably pretty accurate. I think the initial response is we freeze up. We don't know what to do. We feel stuck. And should I feel this? Should I say this? Do I do this? What information do I need? And I think that that is something that as we start to slow down, then we can literally make better, more informed decisions. Now, one other thing I would like to say here is that the 10% at the bottom, they actually make matters worse. And when they make matters worse, they generally do. If a person was drowning, the person coming to save them, they would try to push them under, right? Thinking that that somehow is going to help them rather than relaxing and letting that person just, so to speak, doggy paddle them back to a place of safety and refuge. So that's one part. Now, number 4 is our lost identity. And if you begin to question everything about yourself, what's wrong with me? I've lost my identity. I don't feel like I matter anymore. I don't feel comfortable in public. I don't feel comfortable going out. I don't like to be around people anymore because it's too triggering. I don't like being in public with my partner. But I used to love going out. We used to go out with my friends. I used to enjoy going to church. I used to enjoy just social engagement. And now I don't do those things anymore. I can't deal with the triggers. I can't deal with that. That would be a perfect example of I've lost my core identity because that true self, that authentic self. And so these are some of the core things that I have observed as places that we get stuck. So I'm going to push pause here and see if you guys have any questions, at least up to this point. Any questions at this point? And again, I'm willing to answer questions. I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in at this point, so I will continue on. All right. One of the core things I would like to emphasize, slow down in every way. Slow down your mind, slow down your body, slow down your decision-making process. Once you do have a decision, then move forward with pace. Move. But right now, what I would say to most people is you're gathering information, you're gathering data, you're trying to get information. So I suggest that one of the best things we can do is just we slow down. We slow down the process. All right. One other thing I want to go back to, and that is something that it was in the beginning, and it's what I refer to as information matters. And as I have been contemplating one of the most common conversations that I have with betrayed partners, it really boils down to what information is essential. What do I need to know? And I'm going to talk about this in different phases for a second. The early beginning phase, you're going to have a million and one questions. And really what I suggest if you're in the beginning phase, write down your questions, what's coming to your mind, what are common themes, so you can have a more concise conversation. What I often find is couples get overwhelmed. The betrayed partner is just question after question after question after question after question. And what generally begins to happen is both partners get overwhelmed. And so it's important to identify your core questions and put them in a succinct way so you don't overwhelm yourself and your partner. They're more likely to be effective if you're doing these questions over time rather than in one setting. The human bandwidth, in other words, our ability to deal with stress, especially when we are in such difficult stress or trauma, your partner could probably say multiple things, right? They could answer many of your questions, but you might get stuck in one point, but they still may be talking because of something that they said. You've lost that other part of the conversation. So it's actually a wise idea to do this in a specified time. We're going to talk for 30 minutes or an hour, and then we'll come back to it. Now, a lot of people, they say, we can't do that. But talking late into the evening, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, that's actually not helpful for you when your body's already exhausted. It's harder to solve problems. So one of the things as you get information, do it succinctly, do it in a time frame where you're like, okay, I have more questions, but tonight this will be enough. And what you're in essence doing is you're allowing your mind to say, I'm going to shelve this for tonight. We'll come back to it. It also doesn't overwhelm the relationship system, which if you're trying to figure out how to do your relationship, it's respecting your relationship, because usually after discovery, the betrayed partner has so many questions that the betraying partner, I mean, they get overwhelmed sometimes with all the questions, but sometimes it's their shame and sometimes it's both. But again, when our energy is low, we aren't effective at communication. So now, if I was to take it away from, yes, we're talking about sexual betrayal and we're talking about the trauma, but when we look at the couple dynamics and couple healthy communication and effective communication, when we're having 3 and 4 and 5 hour conversations, it doesn't lead to any positive outcome. It just usually doesn't, because we get worn down, we get worn down, we get worn down. So again, I know this isn't easy, but a time frame can be very helpful. So yes, information matters. And so I'm going to say we need to gather information. Now, I want to talk about 3 things specifically. Smart questions. And I call them smart questions because often our emotions take over. And when our emotions take over, we can really not be asking a question. We can be leading questions, or we can do things or say things that shut our partner down. So contrast this. You are so stupid. I can't believe you cheated on me. You promised me, you let down me, you let down the children. Why did you do it? Now, that is a natural response. If you've done that, that's normal. But what's the outcome of it? Why did you do that? Every answer will be a justification. It will be how they minimize their behaviors. It will be how they deceived you. It will be literally how they manipulated you or how they lied to themselves. Now, contrast that with there's just things I don't understand. Like things that run through my mind is, how did he get there? How did you get there? And then I listen. Now, notice what I just did. Instead of it being, why did you do that? It's an how. How did you get here? And if I'm in that mindset, then I start to hear their story. And it's in a different kind of an environment. See, what's interesting here is the more data you have, the more they're talking, usually it's the better it is for the betrayed partner because you're starting to understand their thought processes. Why did you do that? If I'm in an angry tone of voice or have an angry tone of voice, I can shut them down. But you don't want to shut them down because you're looking for data, you're looking for information. So notice again that difference. I'm just curious. I don't understand how you got there. I'm hurting so much inside. Can you help me understand? Because I'm dying inside. You don't have to ignore your pain or your hurt, but you can communicate with smart questions, curiosity, interest. You can do that. And again, that takes practice and that takes a skill to be able to do that in a way where I'm asking smart questions. Smart questions open people up. They help us understand them because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get information. How did you get there? Let's add a few more questions that could be smart questions. I don't understand right now, and I'll just give you a couple of scenarios. I don't understand. You're saying that you want a closer connection right now. But what I don't understand is why now? What's changed inside of you? Because while you were acting out, you weren't thinking about me and the commitment you've made to me. So what is different now? Now again, they're thinking. They need to think. We don't want to give them the answers. We don't want to tell them what they're thinking. We don't want to tell them how they're feeling. We want to understand how they're thinking and how they're feeling. So if I can get them to open up, that's a smart question. Because then I start to understand what they're feeling. And oh, I understand. I don't agree because you killed me. What you just did is destroying my soul. But at least I'm starting to understand their thought processes. And I might not even agree with it. Most of the time you're going to say that just feels like a bunch of BS. You're just right. But if I can get them talking, I'm going to start to understand more of their thought processes. And then I have to ask myself the question, do I have information that will help me make a decision regarding this relationship? After discovering sexual betrayal, I always say slow down your decision-making process about your relationship. Gather the data, gather the information. If you're choosing to stay, I'm going to ask you a question. Why are you choosing to stay? You should know the answer to that question. If you say, I don't know why I'm staying, then I really invite you to ask the question, why? Do some self-reflection. So really the smart questions if I could go back and say, maybe the smart questions actually begin with us. How do I want to respond here? What is an appropriate communication level? See, these are the types of things that give us actually more information, better approach, because we're asking smart questions. To self, why am I staying? Why am I choosing to do this way? The other part of of information is getting good advice. Now, not all advice is created equal. In fact, when I started looking at the research, many people felt like they were getting bad advice or advice that was not helpful. In fact, over 50% when I asked betrayed partners, when I asked them if the friend's family provided meaningful support, over 50% said somewhat, but not only like 14% said, yeah, it was really good advice and good support. So how do you tell the difference between good advice and bad advice? The best advice is somebody who turns it around and lets you communicate with them what you are experiencing. Good advice actually comes from within you. Now, I know that you probably struggle with trusting yourself. That's common. But ultimately, the best advice actually is within you. A good friend of mine, Ken Patey, taught me a very valuable lesson. He said, the seeds to the solutions to your problems lie within you. Can you trust your voice? If you can't trust your voice, that's work that you need to be able to do. Learning to trust your voice. Okay, so that's a critical part. Advice really is allowing you to have an understanding of yourself. So sometimes I have people say, well, what would you have me do? Or what should I do? What would you do in this situation? I often get these kind of questions. I always turn it around and reflect. Let me ask you a question. You've just told me about your relationship. You've told me about the hurt and the pain. Inside of you, do you have a desire to be with your partner? Do you have it? Let's go a little bit further. Do you have a desire to connect with your partner? Now, early on in this, you may say, I don't know. And I would say that's very fair. So really, we need to go get more information. We need to ask smart questions. Now, notice I'm not telling you what to do. Friends, family, religious leader, anybody who tells you what you need to do in your situation, they're not letting the expert speak. You are the expert. So good advice is somebody who turns around and lets you lead your life. But they're a sounding board. And then you may say, all right, I understand what you've listened to me. You've helped me reflect. You've put a mirror in front of me. Now my question to you is, what do you think I should do? Even there, my statement would be, let's get more information from you first. Is your heart there? Do you want to? Do you want to stay? Do you want to do you want to see if your partner can change? I'm going to ask the questions because I'm not going to answer. I don't have to walk in your shoes. Nobody has to. You do. That's why these questions are so important. Get good information. Next is your body. And I say this in all sincerity. When we are in trauma, our body is in constant stress. It doesn't know how to relax. It doesn't know how to calm down. It has a harder time with decision making. It forgets things. So it's important that you learn to listen to your body. Information from your body can teach you how to heal. I need to take some deep breaths. I need to slow my mind down. In the next couple of weeks on human intimacy, we are going to start, as a part of our subscription model, a breathing, what we call a flow with low. Lauren Hatchett is going to be starting our trauma-informed yoga, where she's going to literally walk you through how to learn to listen to your body. So for those of you who are subscribers, and I know some of you are in attendance today, you're going to have access to that. That is one of the most important things. If you haven't listened to what we did with Lauren, I did a podcast with her a couple of weeks ago with Amy Andrus. The three of us were talking about just how to learn to listen to the body. We talked about the science of it. But again, I don't know how to emphasize this enough. I mean, I can tell you, we have to learn to slow down your body. We have to learn how to do that. And that's why Human Intimacy has Lauren Hatchett, who's going to be doing Flow with Low. And it is really helping you learn to listen to your body. That's how we heal. So get information from your body, get solid information from people who are healthy and willing to let you learn through asking and through being with you in your questions, and then learn how to ask smart questions of the person who's betrayed you. And I would say smart questions can also come from other people. I'm feeling these things. Is that normal? Sometimes we need people to validate what we're experiencing. My hope is attending this kind of a webinar and the things that we're doing can actually validate what you're experiencing. A question that will address A question is, what is my stance on disclosure led facilitated by a therapist? I'll talk a little bit about that in one of my answers below, but that's a great question. I'll get to that question for sure. So I'll come back to that. Again, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask your question. I will answer those questions at the end today. All right, so now let me, what is going on there? There we go. I want to now talk about what I call 5 essential steps to healing from sexual betrayal. And this picture right here for me is it's beautiful, but it's a path. And let me give a little bit of background on why I call these essential steps. For years, we gathered information at our clinic, Adult Recovery, that we work specifically with betrayal trauma and sex addiction. We've had people literally come from all over the world to participate with us in our intensives. And we always ask the question, like, what can we do better? And one of the core things that we found is that people were asking this question, like, if we need more path, we need more direction, we need to know the healing process. That was the feedback that our clinic got over and over and over again. That was one of the reasons why I chose to write my book, The Essentials to Healing from Sexual Betrayal, is because I wanted to give my clients a roadmap, a path. And really, I'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to share with you the path that I've talked with other therapists about this. I've talked with betrayed partners about it. These are some of the core things. Now, by no means is this all encompassing. These are 5 essential steps. I could probably say 50, but these are 5. And the first is to actually identify your path. And what I mean by that is there is a pathway. Let me give you an example. Healing your body, slowing down your racing mind. We would call that emotional regulation. That could and should be a part of your path. Learning how to reduce the PTSD symptoms is one of them. So your path is a path that you've identified. Here is my path. Let's say it's a curriculum, things I'm going to do to heal my mind and body. Regardless of what your partner does, whether they choose to get into recovery or not, learning to listen to your body, learning how to make internalized choices, finding your path. I'm going to have a group support. I'm going to do these things because I know that's what the research says works. So creating your path and learning how to do that, usually it's getting it guided by a therapist or a coach, having people who can support you so they know and you know what you're working on. That actually accelerates your healing, accountability. These are the things I'm working on. All right, number 2, finding your place of safety. Now, I know that this represents a lot of things to a lot of people, these images, but generally speaking, everybody needs to find their place of safety. They need to find their place where their body slows down. And one of the first things that we do at our clinic is we actually have a mindfulness course, we have yoga, because I know that as I work with individuals who've been through trauma, I know that they need to have a safe place to come to. And I can hear a lot of people saying, but I'm so busy, I don't have time. I understand the busyness, but I'm trying to help everybody understand that if we don't help your mind find safety, then it's going to force you into that place because you will be so exhausted, you'll be so worn out. So having a roadmap so you can find safety is absolutely essential. So please find your place of safety. It can be on the beach, it can be in the mountains, but it needs to be your place, a place for safety. Number 3 is to accelerate your healing. You really need to reduce the PTSD symptoms. The 5 core PTSD symptoms, you've probably heard me talk about this over and over and over. It's this. We need to accelerate our healing, reduce the symptoms. The 5 core PTSD symptoms are, first of all, we need to not have a threat to life. That's criteria A. That means we need to create boundaries. We need to be protected. so we aren't in a constant state of feeling fear and threat. And in particular, criteria A is about threat to life. But if I'm afraid that my partner is doing things that I could get an STD, that's a threat to life. And so making sure that I've created proper boundaries there. Criteria B is reliving it, nightmares, flashbacks, and triggers. Wow. I apologize. Apparently I can get balloons up today. I didn't know that. Um, so accelerate your healing by dealing with nightmares, flashbacks. Apparently don't put two fingers up at once, otherwise you get balloons. And if you are having triggers, learning how to respond to those triggers is going to be important. And that's really what we talk about in our Essentials to Healing from Sexual Betrayal course. Number 3 is avoiding people and places that remind you of what your partner did and avoiding your own thoughts and feelings. You can't afford to ignore your own thoughts and feelings. Criteria D is negative cognition and mood. Negative cognition. I'm not safe. Nobody's safe. The world's unsafe. I'm unlovable. Nobody will want me. Those type of negative cognitions, they need to be worked through. Now, I can tell you, you are enough. You are lovable. But you'll say, how do you even know me? You don't know me. But that's important to understand. Then criteria E is emotional arousal and reactivity. Anger, not able to sleep. Your mind is racing. You're hyper vigilant, meaning you're watching what your partner is doing all the time. You're right. You're watching and watching and watching. And then the other part of it is if your mind is racing so much that you're trying to find an escape, some people up to about 20% are doing some kind of self-harm. And again, criteria E, if you really want to accelerate your healing, learn how to do those 5 things, learn how to reduce those. And that's really what the groups that we do, that's what we focus on is doing that. And that's what my content is focused on. If people have PTSD, we need to treat the PTSD. All right, the next one is meaningful support and connections. But again, everything that the research shows, we need meaningful connections. We need connection. Now, one of the biggest challenges with betrayal is you don't know who to trust. There are not trusted people. That's what I often hear from people. And yet, when we do our intensives, our betrayal trauma intensives, or we do our online groups or in person groups, that's where people create their tribe. I can't tell you, I just am finishing a group, and this group has bonded in ways that are just phenomenal. Every Tuesday at 11, I do a group where individuals are there and they participate and they learn and they share and they support each other. And if they're having a hard week, they nurture each other. That is a place of refuge, a place of refuge. That is what we do in our groups. So if you want to join us, please let me know. Let us know. I'll show you how to do that at the end. But if not, find somebody in your area, find your group, find your tribe. Don't do this alone. Don't do this alone. It just extends it. It really does. And so every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, we've got a group that we literally just starting with this next phase, and that's what we do. Now I do charge money because it's my time, but not only that, but you have access to everything that we're doing. I'll share a little bit more about that later. And then number 5 is self-love and compassion. In the roadmap to healing, this might be the most important one. We've talked about group, we've talked about finding your safety, right? These are all incredibly important. But if you don't have self-love and compassion, then the way you speak to yourself, the way you treat yourself won't allow you to heal. Learning how to develop that kind of self-love comes from within you. It's something that we talk about in this process of having compassion, being with your own suffering. And so I don't know how else to emphasize this. Self-love and compassion is absolutely essential for your long-term healing. So it's very important to understand. Now, how do we do that? In many ways, it's actually just getting you back to who you already are. And I mean that literally. See, many betrayed partners, what they've told me over time is I'm angry. I'm angrier than I've ever been. and I don't like who I've become. And transitioning that to a person who is creating boundaries, loving themselves, and showing that self-compassion is absolutely stunning. They're more likely to create boundaries. They're more likely to take a stand when it's appropriate, and they literally love self. All right. Now, one of the things that I just want to emphasize here, this is a quote I often share, but this talks about the body's quest for safety. And I'm going to go back to that concept of safety. Um, Safety and threat are not as psychological constructs, but they have parallels in our body's autonomic nervous system. And so, what I'm talking about here is the body's autonomic nervous system. When it's in a state of calmness, and then we're able to socially connect. So, one of the core things that we want to learn to do is we want to learn to be with people who are safe. We want to be with people. I noticed that there's a question, I'll come to the question, but the question is about I'm afraid of being in a group because it's triggering. But when you hear other people about their healing and how they're going through this process, and you are validated in that, and somebody says, me too, I've been there, I felt that. No longer do you feel isolated and alone. You feel like there's a team and connected. Social bonding comes when we feel safe. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to overcome that fear that there are not safe people any longer. And so our body's autonomic nervous system after betrayal is designed to protect us. It's normal to be angry. It's normal to have these negative cognitions. It's normal to avoid people and places. It's normal to avoid your own thoughts. But your healing is when we reduce those PTSD symptoms, and learning how to do that in one of the most powerful ways is through connection and through attachment. All right. I shared this recently. This person said, because of the Human Intimacy podcast, if you are not listening to the Human Intimacy podcast, please let me invite you to join me and the guests that I have. Amy Andrus is a co-host. And when she's not able to make it, I have other guests that have joined me recently. We did mindfulness with Dallin Brunn. He was trained at UMass Institute by one of the leading experts on mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn. Phenomenal. All right, so I've already answered this question, but if you haven't been to the podcast, I would encourage you to do so. This question is also as a part of our in our subscription, but there are a couple questions that I do want to get to today. And it's this question. And again, if you have questions, I will answer your questions. So put them in the queue. What can I do to get my partner to engage in the healing and recovery process? I just got this one this week. And I'm going to tell you two or three things. First and foremost, the fact that you're asking the questions tells me that you want this relationship you want to see if it can move forward. But you want your partner to engage in the process. So what I want to say to you is, the way you communicate that, if I were role playing with you, I would say, all right, what's your core message that you want to send to your partner? What's the core thing you're trying to say? I want this relationship to work, but I don't know if we can unless change occurs. And I don't know if change is occurring if you're not willing to come with me and participate in this journey of learning how we can get back to a place or get to a place where there's trust again. Because right now, I don't know how to trust you. Now, notice everything I'm saying. I don't know how to trust you. You're not trustworthy. Different way of saying it. I don't know how to trust you. See, what you're trying to help them understand is your perception without saying you. I don't know how to trust you. And the reason why we need to engage in this is because I don't know how to connect. In fact, I was attending a webinar just the other day, and I learned that my body's protecting me. That's how my autonomic nervous system is responding. If I don't feel safe, I don't know how to connect, and I don't know how to feel safe with you. So if you would be willing to do some of these things, it would help me know that you want to save our relationship. How do you feel about that? Do you see this communication? How we communicate is where most couples break down. So starting on Monday, I've got a course, it's called Test Your Relationship. And I'm going to be going through what couples do in the core categories, everything from emotional communication to verbal communication, to how they deal with physical differences in the relationship, how they deal with sexual discrepancies, to how they deal with trauma, how they resolve conflict. That's a group that I'm going to be running every Monday from 4 to 5 at my time. I'm in Mountain Time. All right. So I'm working to help couples learn to communicate effectively. Next question. Why can't I move on? I feel stuck with all the thoughts racing through my mind. All right. So I'm going to go to a concept that I've talked about in the beginning. It's the Zeigarnik effect. And that's what happens when we can't stop issues. Our brain's trying to work through and solve a problem. So usually when a person can't move on, it's because something's not finished. The story, I can't make sense of the story. So when I make sense of the story, then my mind can actually finish. Now, I'm not asking you to make sense of what your partner did, but when your partner starts being accountable, when they start communicating authentically, when they start being open and honest, when they start working on the recovery, it actually helps you with that story. You start to see them in a different way. You start to see their behaviors in a different way. Not that you will ever accept them, but what you come to see is their story, and it doesn't feel as personal to you. So part of this, when we start to move on and we're stuck with our racing thoughts, it means that we need to slow down and we need to give a voice or language to what those racing thoughts are. So if I was to give you any advice on this question, my advice would be this: get out a journal, write down the thoughts that are racing in your mind. Do it for a week just to see what you're learning about constant themes or regular themes. Once you get a theme, that's where we need to focus on it. And if you were going to therapy or you were coming to participate, we would actually walk through this process. So what I would invite you to do here is find what the theme is. Let's just say my mind is racing and I'm constantly thinking about what my partner's thinking. All right. So then what I would do is actually have you go through what's called the 5 whys exercise. It's the 5, why is this bothering me? And you ask questions until you get to a deeper root. Usually you'll come to a core belief. And that belief, if you go through those questions, why is this bothering me? And why does that bother me? And why does that bother me? The 5 whys, you generally get to a concept uh, related to your self-belief. I'm stupid for staying. I'm not lovable. I'll never be enough. Those are core beliefs that I find often in betrayed partners. So I feel stuck with all the thoughts racing through my mind. That literally is the way we do it, is we get to the core belief and then we look at what's happening, the thoughts. We deal with the core belief. Usually that's usually going to be through some core trauma work, but not always. Sometimes when we get to core beliefs, we can challenge those. And so that question, why can't I move on? We need to finish that story. All right. Are there any questions at this point? I'm going to push stop there for a second, and just appreciate you guys being with me. I've got a couple of other things, but do you guys have any questions? Let's make sure that I'll go through the chat. Yeah, let's see. All right. Yeah, and so Patty, to answer your question, if you are triggered, that's something that I would like to know, because every group I run, I generally focus on helping you through the healing process, and we support each other. It's a very caring group, because I won't have it any other way. You need a safe place, and that's the goal of that. Um, this I've been okay. 4 years post D-Day this month, and I still feel stuck. I think I should be further along. Again, I think we would go to the Zeigarnik effect. Uh, if you will email me personally, Patty, you can email me at drkevinskinner@humanintimacy.com. I will send you the video for the Zeigarnik effect. And I would really encourage you to watch the Zeigarnik effect if your spouse is willing to watch it as well. That webinar that I did on the Zeigarnik effect, it's a part of our paid subscription, but I'll send you that video because I think it would be really good for you and your husband to watch. I mean, it explains partially why we get stuck because we can't finish the story. And sometimes we have to be able to finish and make sense of the story. And that the healing process is making sense of the story. Um, All right. So Liz, I want a lot of validation from trusted people that my boundaries aren't overreactions, punishing spouse. How can I know the difference between making my spouse pay uh, penance versus boundaries that protect me? I'm worried about self-deception. That's a really good question. There's two or three things that we know about boundaries. One is boundaries are designed to protect you. I'm not trying to tell my partner what to do. So big separation here. A boundary is for self. It's not to tell another person how they're going to do recovery or what they're going to do. There's a podcast that I did with Marianne Michaelis on boundaries. And if you want to listen to that podcast, it will give you suggestions on creating boundaries. That would be one of my core suggestions. Go listen to that podcast. It will help explain a little bit more. But self-deception is when I think I'm doing this to protect myself, but really I'm trying to protect or I'm trying to force my partner to do something else. So boundaries are if something happens, how am I going to respond to it? Boundaries are also about core values. And in our conversation and in my book, Rebuild Your Relationship After Sexual Betrayal, I have a whole section on boundaries. And really, boundaries need to start in a couple dialogue because you're actually redefining your relationship. You have to redefine the relationship after sexual betrayal. And you have to reestablish boundaries and couples boundaries. And that's a conversation about everything from our communication to how we spend our time to our sexual relationship. Everything has to be reevaluated and reconsidered. So everything surrounds boundaries there. And if you feel like you're being controlling, then we have to ask, what am I being controlling in? Let's say that, for example, you don't want to have sex. Well, if you don't want to have sex and you don't feel safe, that's not controlling. That's where you're at. I don't feel safe. Now, 10 years later, if we're still not having sex, then obviously something hasn't been resolved and we're still in this relationship. So we have the opportunity to have real important conversations. But ultimately, all human connection is built upon safety, and we only connect when we feel safe. So boundaries are designed to protect self. If my partner acts out, how am I going to respond to that? And they need to know how I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to choose to ask you to leave the room or the house, or I will after a relapse, right? So it's a clear expectation. And the better we are at creating boundaries, the better we are at having healthy relationships. Our relationships are protected by our boundaries, and our boundaries need to be defined by our values. Values, what do I value the most? What does your partner value the most? These are all conversations that we need to have in our relationships. All right. Let's see. My partner has had a relapse in the last 6 months and continued with dishonesty after 7 years of recovery. He's told me in the past that without a polygraph, he would never have told me the truth. Now he claims to be working in his dishonesty. I don't experience this with him, and I am the point of looking for separation. So much of what he said um, reflects my state of mind. Any thoughts on dishonesty and an addict that won't commit to honesty and how there's hope of having a relationship with this person? If a person chooses to be dishonest, it's really hard to connect because safety is, I mean, honesty is a requirement for safety. When I feel safe, I trust that you're being honest, you're being truthful. And so as long as there isn't honesty, it's really hard to rebuild the relationship. In fact, it's almost impossible. So I think that conversation is why can't he commit to honesty, and what in the world is going on in the background that's a part of it. Now, let me ask a question, and this is just something for you to think about. Is he honest about his sexual behaviors and lying about other things? Or is it specifically about the sexuality and he's lying to you about his sexual behaviors? Now, some of the reasons why I ask that is there are people who have grown up in homes where they literally learned to lie to stay out of trouble. Now, everybody has a story of why they lie. But the question is why lie? Why, what is it? What is the value? What do I get out of lying? And even that question is a very important one to study and to understand. Why do you feel the need to lie? Again, getting someone to open up. All right, so there's some questions I would invite you to think there. All right. All right. It looks like okay, yeah. So if you want the video, Dr. Kevin Skinner at humanintimacy.com. Dr. Kevin Skinner at humanintimacy.com. All right, now before I close up shop today, I'm just want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to share one other thing here. Oops. Well, let's see, wrong one. So that's interesting. It's going to the wrong one. There we go. All right, so I'm going to tell you now, this is an opportunity to be a part of human intimacy, and I just want to share it with you. One of the things that we've been working on is assessing PTSD. The way we do that is through an assessment. I did a webinar on that last week, and I find that if we're not diagnosed properly, we can extend the PTSD symptoms because we're not addressing the PTSD symptoms. So we have that. Then, as a part of this, I have one-on-one feedback where you take the assessment, and I then have one-on-one feedback with you, where I actually go through your results with you, and together we create a plan for you. Then we have what's called group support, and that is what I talk about on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we also have another option to drop in a drop-in group with Andrea Rowley. That's on Mondays. Then I have an online course. It's 40 videos to help you guide you through reducing the PTSD symptoms. In my mind, it's the best content that I've created for helping reduce the PTSD symptoms. You can go out through that on your own pace, and you can watch the videos. You can rewatch the videos to help you make sense of how to reduce the symptoms. And then we have what is our activities, things to actually do, where you do some homework and some assignments. And that is a part of our Essentials to Healing from Sexual Betrayal. And I'm going to just share this final part. You can actually go to humanintimacy.com where you can learn more about everything that we have to offer. And I just want to share this final thought with you. Again, humanintimacy.com. The final thought that I would like to share with you today is this. Whatever you do, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. I'm going to invite you, if you want to join us, we have a subscription model. It is $150 a month. You get access to the group on Tuesdays. You get access to the Test Your Relationship course, where I'm going to be doing a webinar on Mondays to go through each of those sections to help you improve your relationship, how to communicate more effectively. In addition, you will have access to other professionals who are going to be answering questions and providing content support. And you'll have access to every course, how to communicate when you don't know what to say. We have what's called the relationship dilemma. If you're struggling to make a decision about your relationship, you'll have access to all these groups, all the content, and it's $150 a month. So that is our offer. And I invite you, it's humanintimacy.com/learn more if you want to learn more. I would love to have you join us. And I do thank you for your time. Any final questions today? All right, Patty, thank you for your kind words. You're welcome. She says, thank you for your commitment to the field of work, this field of work. Honestly, I love doing what I do. And part of the reason why is I want to help people who don't feel heard. And I want to make sure that they have support that they need. So again, I just genuinely appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for being here. All right, I will end the webinar now unless I see any more questions come in. All right, everybody, you're welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Please visit humanintimacy.com, and I'd love to have you join us. We literally are just starting our group, and if you join us today, you can have access to that, and you can start Test Your Relationship. If you really want to accelerate your healing, please join us. All right. Thanks, everybody. You guys take care.